All right. Hey, everyone. Well, thank you for joining us today. And thank you, Terry and Erwin, for a fantastic introduction to our Modern Data Culture Summit. For those who haven't met me, my name is Sid Atkinson. I'm the Director of Catapult's Data and AI Practice. Joining us today for our discourse on data culture is Mindy Russell, Catapult's Chief Marketing Officer. So quick intro for me, I've had the pleasure of working at Catapult for almost 15 years now, and I've been in this theater of data for almost 20. I work with and lead a team of data and agile professionals with skills across almost every aspect of data and the data state. It's a really passionate crew. They have a lot of amazing and fun talks scheduled for today and tomorrow, and so I do hope you make as many of them as you can.
Sid, you guys see my slides advance? I'm having a hard time getting them to advance.
I saw it go once and then it stopped.
All right, is it going now?
No, not yet.
Okay. There we go.
Yeah, all right. So our agenda for this session is pretty straightforward, and yet we will walk this fine line in how we're both seek to discuss and define something that feels ethereal, right, as culture. But we are going to then make it as concrete as we can through our narratives. We will review kind of why the question of why culture, and then define that data culture. And then after positing that working definition, Mindy will guide us through an instructive story concerning the evolution of marketing analytics and marketing data culture. She will then pass that thread back to me to complete this intricate web. And what I will do my best is break down those observations so that we can all attempt to see beyond and behind so that we can better grasp how all of this comes together. So, why talk in terms of culture? Is it still not advancing, Mindy?
It's advancing on my side. You're not seeing it advance. Okay. Are you not seeing the why talk?
It should be showing. I just clicked it. I clicked on the Teams to move it forward.
Is it still not showing up? Sorry, it's advanced on my side. I don't know what's happening. Hold on. Okay. Try again.
Yeah.
Okay.
I believe we're good. So, why talk in terms of culture? And many of you probably seen this culture eats strategy for breakfast. And surprise, surprise, no, that is not a Peter Drucker quote. So admittedly, I'm going to, for this, rely on a general understanding many of you have on decades of research in the area of company culture and how critical these cultures are to the long-term success of any organization. Two seminal books from my early years in the workplace, In Search of Excellence and Built to Last, talk extensively on this topic and examining distinguishing characteristics of visionary and enduring organizations. So I won't disavow us on any talk on culture, rather I'll focus on defining it so that we can identify a data culture inside the broader context, and then make the case for its importance and why you should care and feed it. So how might we define culture generally? A simple way to view this is culture is a series of habits, beliefs, and behaviors encouraged within an organization. So from this prevailing definition, we'll extend into talking about a data culture. Now, one thing I will say is Mindy and I go about talking about things today, there are going to be some of these narratives that many of you will be sympathetic to and how we seek to be informative and instructive, and through these concrete examples. But one of the risks that we will admit that we run into is that some of you may see these particular narratives as immaterial to your specific situation, your team, or culture. But as with any topic like this, we're following a successful pattern and set in those aforementioned books and many others, using cases from real experience. And our goal is really to lift the understanding for as many of you as possible. So in terms of a data culture specifically, what we see is data culture is a subset of that culture that evolves around decision making. One that may view as a pillar, in any flourishing company culture. So for our purposes, we will work with this definition. A data culture fosters a set of norms regarding decision-making that embraces and expects emphatic and empirical proof. So why these? Why these words? Well, we've carefully selected this phrasing. If we look back at culture as a series of habits, defining a data culture must speak to habits. It must speak to norms and expectations that we set. And expectations alone aren't sufficient. It's rather the embracing of discussion, it's the embracing of discourse, exchange, disagreement, research. It's all those lively, messy back and forth bits that comprise that we need to make more weighty decisions. And that's the key. A data culture must embrace that. Not necessarily as a philosophical truth-seeking event, but as a rubric for making more informed decisions. Mindy, are we advancing the slides? It looks like it's still stuck on.
I'm trying to. I'm having to manually go back to the slides every single time and restart it. I don't know what's happening with my PowerPoint, but it will not advance on the click.
No worries. I have tried advancing it to counterculture. Does that show up now?
It's up, yes.
Okay, perfect. Well, so just as it's important to understand what is a data culture, it is justifiably critical to understand the anti-patterns, or as in our tongue-in-cheek phrasing, counterculture. And yes, we're not talking culture club. Counterculture movements may frequently enlighten or instruct, or in many cases improve our conditions, or introduce us to new modalities in expressing human thought and emotion. Counterculture movements can also be destructive, tearing down rather than building up. And it is this latter that we focus on. And to give some of those examples, we are all probably used to the phrase, "That's how it's done around here." And proponents of this thinking are wise to hide that expression, as it kind of betrays their counterproductive attitudes. So today, what does this look like? Well, you'll find the same thinking hidden and propositioned as, "Oh, but this is what we found to be successful," with no data or model proffered to substantiate those claims. So other things that you can do to identify a counterculture or these anti-patterns as the prevailing winds in your organizations. You might see rampant thinking that thinks that democratizing data can solve everything. Well, the reality is not everyone should have access to all the things. This statement is simple, powerful, and in some cases truly a goal, but without the context and understanding, it lacks nuance, and it's just right to be countered, and countered properly by people concerned with responsible use of information. Another sign is rampant adversaries. You might see this as infighting with groups, people writing polemics but no supporting facts. The other easy one to spot in your organization is really a lack of decentralized decision making. When any of us lack information, we are prone to push off making decisions. Decisions then are left to higher tiers in the organization, because any one of us, any one member of that body or org cannot justify or defend a position, and a decision should it go awry. And thus, we just want to pass that back up. It's too far. All right. So, but I'll say, and for those that know me, I am not prone to a sour disposition, not by a long shot. So I'll happily transition to underlining for all of us on the call how we can identify those green shoots that lay proof your organization is headed in a positive direction, in a direction that amplifies data central to decision making, central to habits, and thereby central to culture. As typical with many things in life, we're not seeking perfection, and truthfully, we shouldn't be, and it shouldn't be expected. But what's important here is an attitude, an expectation, acceptance that things aren't perfect, but that in that imperfection, we're going to work together to support and seek. And for that is what cultures are good at. It's ratifying purposes beyond one any individual so that it may perpetuate. Data cultures seek and support fact-finding, building models, or things to explain observations and posit new ideas. What this can look like in your organization is like a focus on outcomes versus output. A focus on what is it that this process or this thing that we propose to do is, and why are we doing it, and be open. So when organizations are clear on that purpose and their value delivered, they consistently seek ways to measure that output and then improve on that. So another sign is active discussions up and down the ranks regarding data, what it means, how to use it, how to improve it. And lastly, a really good sign is leadership. Leadership has a declared plan and metrics that go beyond vanity. We all know revenue and budgets matter, but to what end are we measuring progress towards our goals, towards a purpose, to what we say we're going to do? How are current events impacting our core purpose and what we do to identify progress? Everything's going to change, as we mentioned before, but leadership will set this tone that reverberates all up and down. So as we go through the remainder of the summit, I challenge everyone on the call to identify both counter and productive culture signals in your org, because you will have both. So, and with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mindy, our Chief Marketing Officer at Catapult. Mindy has a long history prior to Catapult and at Catapult running marketing programs, initiatives, department. She will walk us through her data culture journey and the data culture journey from the marketing perspective. Mindy?
Thank you, Sid. And hopefully you guys are seeing the evolution of marketing data culture slide now. Hopefully we've got it fixed. Sorry about all the technical problems this morning. Are we good? Are we on the right slide now?
We are still on the counterculture slide.
All right, that's what I was afraid of. Okay, it did not advance. So we're going to stop sharing. We're gonna have a mulligan here, everybody, and we're gonna try to reshare. Sorry about that. It's technology is awesome until it's not, because on my side that's what it shows it's sharing. So all right, are we looking at evolution of a marketing data culture now? Or not still?
Yes, we are good to go.
All right, let's see if it continues to work this time. So everybody knows that data is critical in your organization. It's obviously a fundamental part of businesses, but it can be really challenging, and it can be very challenging for companies to adopt. It takes a lot of knowledge, and it's not been a thing that most companies have done particularly well for a really long time. Marketing, maybe more than any other part of an organization, has been changed dramatically over the last 10 years by technology and the data that comes along with that technology. As Sid said, I've been around for a little while, and not to date myself, but in that time frame, I've seen an enormous amount of change in the marketing organization, both at Catapult, but really in the profession itself, and in the way that marketers think, in the way that they plan, and the way that they operate. So I'm going to take you on a little short journey. Hopefully this will work, of kind of what the marketing journey has been like as adopting a data culture. So when I first entered marketing, it was a giant black box. And hopefully we're all seeing a giant black box right now. It was a mystery to most people. Most people didn't understand what marketing did. They knew that it was really important to companies, but they didn't really understand what we were doing or how to measure it. And so marketing really worked by gut instinct. We used our intuition and our knowledge of how things should work. And so we were really focused on the outcomes being the number of impressions and that brand value we could create, which is kind of a nebulous way of measurement, a nebulous way of working. But that was really all we had to draw from. And that went on for quite a while. So it was a wild, wild west in marketing back then. And that was a absolute ton of fun. At the time, we were mostly marketing generalists. So the folks in the marketing teams in most companies had skills in a wide variety of areas. And we measured our success based on the number of activities we did, the tactics that we ran, rather than the outcomes that they generated. And we had very little data to go from. So for example, in the advertising and promotion world, we would do advertisements based on the circulation of magazines, for example, the amount of exposure that we were going to get for our brands, divide that by the cost, and that's how we would decide where we were going to run an advertisement. But there was not almost ever really a going back to determine if that was an effective ad or not, because there was really no way to measure that. Websites were really new back then, and so marketers had no information to go on and really no way to measure what was happening on the websites. And so marketers definitely went on a gut instinct of what we liked. And so the outcomes there tended to be what the marketing teams liked to see, what the marketing teams thought should happen. But there was really no understanding of what customers wanted to see or needed to see or what was effective, and really no way to capture that information. With campaigns, this is back when snail mail and direct mail was really popular and was a thing. We did a lot of what we would call, what we affectionately termed spray and pray, which would be sending the same flyer to every single person in your database and hoping that a few people respond to that. And the tactics and the measurements there were measured based on the number of people you sent it to, really more than the outcomes that they generated. So again, very based on what you did and not what you got. Our relationships that we built, this is long before social, of course, so it was very built on our things like trade shows. I know we all miss trade shows very much, and doing big in-person events, something that we all aspire to go back to. But the way that we looked at trade shows were the size of the trade show. Sometimes we would look at things like the audience within the trade show and then the cost. So again, based on just audience metrics is really the only thing we had to draw decisions out of. And then we were usually looking at outcomes like how many people stopped by our booth, which of course it's a good metric, but if you had a really great tchotchke, it meant you had a lot of people stop. It was not always an effectiveness measure that we had. And in general, marketing teams lived inside that black box I talked about. We really didn't connect to the other parts of our organization. We didn't share any information we had. They didn't share information they had. We really lived in our own little black box. And then about 10 years ago, technology really started to change marketing, and it became what they call the MarTech revolution. There is now a dramatic change in the way that marketing operates. And so about 7 years ago, there's only about 1,000 marketing tools in the marketplace, and then that continued to grow at an amazing pace, such that last year there was more than 8,000 different marketing tools available to solve very specific business problems for marketing teams. So now the marketing world looks like this, which is absolutely crazy to look at. Well over 8,000 tools out in the marketplace today available to marketing teams. Obviously, no marketer is using all of these, but we all use tools from every one of these categories because we have different tools for advertising and for content and for social and so on. So all of us have all of these tools available to us, and every marketing team is using some segment of this. What these all have in common is that they produce an enormous amount of data, and that data is generally usually segmented within its own individual point solution. It stays within that area, and it's really hard to connect that data together and to learn interesting things from that. So this revolution really changed the way that marketing teams were structured. And so we went from being this team of generalists into specialized marketing teams and having specialized information. It was really necessary because we are now using tools. There was a lot of information and best practices you had to know about your area of expertise in order to do your job really well. So for example, in the advertising and promotion area, a person might now know and does now know what is happening very specifically with that ad. What are people clicking on? What are they interested in? What types of ads are performing better than other ads? They know a ton of information in their area. The website person not only knows the traffic that comes to the site, but they also know things like the length of time on the site. They can use special tools to see what parts of the site people are hovering on, where they're going on the site. They can get a ton of information on what is happening on their website. In campaigns and content, those teams can know what type of information people are interested in. Are they interested in infographics or ebooks? Is it emails? What are people responding to? Are there certain things that they're clicking on, and so on? So those teams know a lot of information in their space. And then social, of course, is a new thing that has come along, and social is a great place to get immediate feedback and immediate information because people can click and they can like and they can share, and we can tell immediately what people are engaging with, which tells us a lot about their interests. The challenge that this created is each one of those people is in a siloed area, and the information that they have on what a customer is interested in and what they're engaging with is oftentimes not connected with the rest of their teammates and shared across those platforms so that we get a better picture. And then also, while there is an improved engagement from marketing into the operational areas over the last decade or so, it's still not at most companies really across all of the different areas. There's still a lot of connection between sales and marketing, always obviously go hand in hand. but it is frequently kind of a one-way street of information flowing from marketing to the sales team, but usually not in return. So what happened out of all of this is an explosion of information, but not an explosion of knowledge. There is, a ton of information available at our hand, but we don't have insight about what's really truly happening, and we don't have a way to put that all together. So where the Catapult team has gotten to from a marketing perspective is creating a more of a connected data culture. So gathering that information, not just knowing what happened, but taking that information and going further to understand why it happened. So using advertising as an example, not only understanding that someone clicked on the ad, but understanding why they clicked on the ad and were there things that they could do that would cause things to happen differently. So for example, with an advertisement, we know that people will tend to click on advertisements with people looking towards you and smiling versus someone in profile will drive a higher engagement. Same with colors matter. For example, a red button generally drives a higher level of engagement than a blue button. So those are things that we can learn and we can understand why, and we can change how we do things. The connected data culture for us means that we have to make sure that all of those tools that we have that we need to do our jobs really well are connected together, and that information has a way to flow back and forth so that we can understand what is really truly happening, not just within our individual technical silo, but across all of our marketing organization. And then further, using that information across all of our organization so that we can make sure that we have the best view of our customers and so that we can understand what their needs truly are and deliver the right information to them at the right time. So what this means at Catapult is we've recently done a migration from our Marketo platform, which is a world-class marketing automation platform, but meant we were very siloed away from the rest of the organization. And we migrated to Dynamics 365 Marketing so that we could make sure that we have that data in a place that we can share that information to the rest of the team in a safe and secure manner, in a way that they can use it when they need it. But we know that there is data access. That's one of the absolute key fundamental things of creating a data culture, is making sure that the data access is there so that then we can start to think about how to make use of that information so that we can do our jobs better. So where are we headed next? So this is true of Catapult's marketing team as well as every other marketing team out there. The place we all want to go is into a more prescriptive area of not only knowing what happened and why it happened, but moving to that next step in the Gartner chart here of what will happen and how can we make that happen? How can we use data to predict if we make certain changes, how can we move things along? And then using things like AI to uncover business needs for our customers so that we can make sure that we are providing that personalized experience for them and giving them the information that they need. So an example could be something like, if we have a customer who is downloading content or viewing web pages on security, for example, and then we happen to have that same customer account putting in a ticket in our system saying that they need help with security for something, that might tell us that, hey, we need to reach out to the customer further and we need to give them some resources and some assets around security because that might be a challenge for them. And that would give them the relevant information rather than just applying whatever information we have at hand to them. That provides a much better experience for our customers. So that's definitely the way that marketing is going. And we all feel that a bit today in the B2C world, where there's an amazing amount of information and personalization that you get from the major marketers. It's much more technically difficult to deliver in the B2B kind of scenario. So going back to Sid's ideas of the green shoots and the things that we see as the positive signs of that data culture in a marketing organization, the first one being inquisitiveness. The thought process of asking why things happen and what can I do with the information that I have and how can I use that information to provide better service and to provide better information to my customers. And so using that inquisitiveness to ask more questions rather than just looking at what happened. Experimentation is really important in the marketing world as well. So experimentation for us looks like A/B testing. So with an advertisement, we have the ability to look at multiple different ads and testing those in market before we release them to the full advertising campaign that we're going to run. Same thing with emails and things like that. We can do a lot of different tests to make sure that what we're doing is really effective before we roll it out in a broader sense. And then data access, a green shoot related to data access is people asking for information and wanting to have access to the information. As long as we find ways to do that in a safe and secure manner to get them the information they need that they should have access to at the right time, that's a really great way to show that we are moving towards that data culture. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Sid so that he can talk as well about the pillars of a data culture.
All right, excellent. Yeah, so I am surmising that Mindy's story probably prompted several of you to think back to say, hey, I remember something that we did that was counter to a data culture. Well, and you know what? I'm happy if those are some of the things that you did think about, because our goal here is to make sure that you walk with an understanding what these cultures look like. But aside from seeing, either your own foibles in the past or, points where the marketing and the general marketing culture stumble, I think a key takeaway I want to suggest is this. Marketing has prevailed, is prevailing, and will continue to prevail because they are a data-eager group. They're always evolving, and at times, as Mindy alluded to, the scrappy underdog stitching together information across Excel and, God forbid, Access. Or in some cases, is a dominant player with a suite of enterprise tools and boundless information. So we may review this topical biography through this lens. It illustrates a culture always seeking empirical information to drive decision-making, and that's important. We want to repeat this. Well, so how can we break this down? And looking at many current frameworks, these things guide towards looking at the underlying assets of our IT systems, of our data systems, our tools. How do these things be maintained? But had these frameworks been sufficient for driving the change that many of us seek in our data cultures, well, we might not even be giving this talk today. And while each of these frameworks, I will still say, are heavy in value, they are viewed by us as part of a larger whole. So what is that holistic view that we can take in describing a data culture? And well, I think that last word is the key, culture. So we recall from the beginning of the talk, where we stated culture is this series of habits, beliefs, and behaviors encouraged within an organization. An organization, well, it's made up of people. So any view on data culture leaves out these habits, these beliefs, the people, and their belief and adoption of the systems, well, it's going to be lacking. So let's go through what we see as these pillars. Some very instructive prescriptive frameworks, such as CMMI, are fantastic. So let's make sure we're not diminishing those. Not at all. In fact, it's quite the opposite. Capability frameworks such as CMMI's data management maturity model are critical to our understanding of what needs to happen so that we can have data in a secure and robust capability. So let's just quickly remember, a data culture fosters that set of norms regarding decision-making that embraces and expects emphatic and empirical proof. So a framework must speak to those parts of the organization that adopt, engage, and utilize data as a capability. So in adding the people dimension, we are particularly fixated on outcomes as the most important. Outcomes that underline engagement in an adoption of a data-driven ethos. Outcomes that confirm data-driven thinking is ingrained within the organization. Leadership. And outcomes that indicate a broad entrenchment of data-driven ideation across all the levels of the organization. So everything about the model by which we view progress is focused first on outcomes achieved by participating in that model. If any of these categories, when we were first putting it together, didn't have a strong correlation to outcomes, well, we set it aside in favor of ones that did. Thus, we'll admit that there's probably other categories that we thought of, and that as you look at this list of 6, that you're thinking of as well. But I will say, as with any good data culture, be prepared for an animated, lively, and wonderful discourse on these topics. So what we're going to do, my colleagues are going to actually be breaking apart this 6 models of analytics, strategy, ideation, adoption, governance, infrastructure, and lifecycle. But before I close today, there are 3 key aspects I will particularly stress: analytics strategy, analytics adoption, and data literacy, which falls under data governance. I'm going to concede my bias now. Stressing these 3 is based on, well, my heuristic and not proved through rigor yet. It is based on our observations as to which direction in all the many engagements that we've done with clients And what we see as the things most telling for a trend in a company's data culture. And all of it overwhelmingly favors these three as we look back. But as with the theme of today, show me the data and I will yield my case. In the meantime, I'm going to have fun reviewing these three and telling you why I think they carry weight. Adoption. So we want to aim, what we actually all want is to aim for a vibrant community using data to make decisions. If we have engagement, and that engagement looks like usage and training requests and feature requests on the data and ideas, these are affirmative signals that your data culture adoption is positively trending. So what might we ascertain about a broader data culture and looking at adoption? Well, we've found this to be a promising means to discover those green shoots in the organization, as Mindy was talking about. And also, as she talked about, adoption doesn't have to be easy to exist. As many of us had to do in our past in search of answers in our careers, we might struggle mightily to yank data out of the systems and sit there and amass it in spreadsheets, or God forbid, have our own local SQL server. And we've probably engaged in covert operations involving coffee shop gift cards and off-hours meetings to arrange access to those systems. I will say, of course, I am speaking from stories I've heard, not from things I've actually done. Positive adoption rates are a sign that we are building the data features, the models, and insights our organization and people need. It's also a good proof that habits are changing. So reflecting again quickly on Mindy's story, it's that eagerness to adopt data-led thinking that assists in pulling the entire organization forward. If no one is seeking answers, seeking insights, or seeking to collaborate around data, you'll find it a Sisyphean task before you in trying to drive culture change. It's contrary to Field of Dreams. If you build it, there is no guarantee that they will come. So measuring this is multifaceted. What might you look at when you leave these sessions later today? Well, what are the number of requests for new data features? Or actually, do you even track that? Do you have a way of knowing that? There's engagement KPIs that we can typically look at, even if it's in tools such as Office and Excel. There's inventories. One of the key things is inventories of these shadow IT data systems. So if you don't have a great data capability inside your organization today, sometimes just doing an inventory of how many shadow things do we have, whether it's the Excel access, proliferation of things on OneDrive, SQL servers, well, back before the cloud under desk, but maybe SQL, the data systems spun up in the cloud these days that are outside the purview of IT. And then information sharing metrics. What do we see happening either in the shares of data through Teams or other collaboration tools? One of the next ones is data literacy. So if analytics is key to outcomes associated with an organization's rise in maturity, literally literacy signals the organization or your team's cross-department collaboration. And it can be a sign of the intensity of that collaboration. So what am I alluding to by this? Adoption has the potential to be high in your organization, but it can still be siloed. It's kind of like each drummer in a band wearing the same uniform, marching down the same street, and yet we're all hammering a different rhythm. Measures on data literacy indicate how often we're actually turning to our peers in another department to seek a common understanding. Dilbert has jabbed at corporate lingo for some time now, and we all partake in that chuckle, having lived it for so long. But as we laugh, we all inherently know language is powerful. It's defining. It can be inclusive in identifying members of part of the tribe, the in culture, and the know. And our data literacy is no different. These common lexicons drive understanding, engagement, and really further enable insight. So if we walk into an org and we see a changing, evolving, or wide-spanning data dictionary, for example, it's not the only thing, it's another example of a green shoot within your organization, and one that signals the roots are potentially deep. And the last one I'll emphasize is analytics strategy. Analytics is a long-term process. I think one key insight I gained from quite a few years ago that I'll share that changed the tenor of my thought and consequently how I envision, spoke, and engage with customers. In my first steps in the workplace, I looked at data as a project that we performed. Insights were gained, users consumed the new shiny thing we built, and along we all merrily went. But in those first few years, I watched several of those implementations rocket up in value, only to fall as fast as GameStop after the reverse short squeeze. And then we walked away. So what was the difference in situations where implementations stuck and those that failed to receive or achieve ROI? Well, many things, now that we have this model to view it, but another key attribute continues to hold out as a leading indicator, just as much as adoption and literacy. And that pivot was part of viewing data and insights as really a service capability within the organization, something that must continually exist. Yes, projects, we will still do data projects, and projects will still happen, and we will need them to continue to thrive. But within the context of the organization, seeing insights and the use of data as a strategic service capability is critical. Organizations that do this, well, they thrive. And so my strategy makes my final item on the short list. We all aspire to have innovation and insights and discussion and new ideas and great new things emerging from, well, really any possible corner of the organization. And they absolutely can. But leaders set the tone and building the capacity and setting the targets to which we all aspire. So the other thing I think that we all can take comfort in is that strategy does not need to be executed in full competence, right? We don't have to have MBAs from the best schools. What we need to look for here is that leaders make the attempt, measure, reflect, and try again. So leaders don't have to have the answers, but they should be good at asking the questions that steer the teams to the right answers or, good choices. Leaders explain reasons, choices, and expect others to do so. Leaders in the org seek to quantify this uncertainty about the answer and encourage others to do so as well. And lastly, lots of transparency and honesty using data. So as with anything deemed critical to the lifeblood of an organization, it requires long-term planning, investment, and most of all, intent. So all the more so that data culture is an area of opportunity and focus, and it will take that fortitude, vision, and persistence to keep all of us on the path of data culture adoption. So what's changed? And I think that's a fair question because organization culture is not a new topic. As we visit the beginning, and I'll pose and answer questions now that perhaps have been in the back of minds from the start of this talk. Why now? What's changed that permits this to be a priority topic today, given, honestly, it's evident culture wins, and that a vibrant and succeeding culture needs a data-driven decision-making to reinforce core principles and seek innovation. So, as with many topics in today's talk, this is not an exhaustive list. Rather, it's our observations across a variety of industries and seen as causal agents in those customers of ours seeking change. So link the first three. This is an easy one: volume, variety, and velocity. It's simple, but it's important. It's a nod to the changing data landscape over the past 2 decades. More information in more types submitted than ever before, some of which is truly valuable, the rest, jury's out. But you know what? A robust data culture would love to tackle that problem. Which kind of brings us to the second, made ever more urgent in many cases by the first, responsible use. It's a time when it's apropos to invoke that Peter Parker principle, with great power comes great responsibility. And all acknowledge that information entrusted to us must be treated with care, used appropriately, and insights vetted through many lenses. And all the more so if the societal or organizational impact is large, all done prior to use. I think the last one is cloud. The scale and speed and efficiency in building and maintaining vast, really vast modern data estates has never been more accessible. It's crazy, the pace in Azure, and the depth and breadth is just breathtaking. And so much so that honestly, our most critical challenge is focusing customers and ourselves on what needs to be achieved, because it's really easy and effortless to remain lost forever in the art of the possible. So many shiny things, so many fun tools and new capabilities to talk about. So where we are today is tools and tech that once took months or years to implement now may be spun up in a matter of hours, vetted in days and made accessible. So all of this underlines why your data culture journey is of utmost importance. As we despise hearing in our youth that the only constant's change, putting a focus in place on data culture that will always inspire your organization is critical for adapting to that change. So with that, I'd like to say thank you for your time today. We have truly enjoyed sharing our thoughts and our insights with you, and we do hope that you enjoy the remainder of the summit. Final thought, just as everyone is, before you head out that virtual door for the next session, I'll brief you on a typical first in-depth conversation we have with organizations regarding data culture. As we mentioned, at the beginning, it can be difficult to think about improving what you don't know how to measure, what you don't know how to put service capabilities around, and that's what we do with this workshop. Many of the insights and scoring within the framework are derived through this instructive step, and we're happy to talk more if you wish. Lastly, I will remind everybody, please visit the schedule for the day's sessions. Next up is measure your data maturity and build your roadmap. This is a wonderful and in-depth talk on the maturity model. Thank you for your time.
I'd also like to remind everyone to please take the surveys that we have at the end of the sessions. In the spirit of being a data-driven company, we always want to see what sessions people enjoyed, what topics you were interested in, how we did, technical problems notwithstanding, of course. We do have there's a drawing, I think it's a $75 Amazon gift card that will put all of the survey takers in. So if you attend 6 of these sessions and you take 6 surveys, your name's in the drawing for 6 times. And so we'll reward you for doing surveys just so that we get some feedback on how these sessions went. And I think we've got just a couple of minutes if we have any questions that anybody would be interested in.
Oh, somebody's got their hand up.
Sid, I can't see the chat, so I'll rely on you.
Let's see, I cannot.
I have a question. Could you speak a little bit how organizations can go about walking the line between the prescriptive analytics that you talked about and still respect personal privacy?
Ooh, good one. Yeah, so all of it needs to start with the outcome in the end in mind. And I think that's, that is the key. There is a growing, and one of the reasons I focused on the term responsible versus ethical. Well, ethical kind of gets into a much bigger philosophical piece. And so it's kind of a question of what's responsible to use. So in some cases, you might, view there's kind of the hot bucket, hot topic on, well, what is it okay to know about somebody's ethnicity and race, right? Well, that responsibly can be used in medical scenarios, where in other scenarios is not, right? So as has been highly publicized cases and information in like the criminal justice space, and that leads to these biases. So, or not leads to, it reinforces biases that are already existing. So the first kind of question on determining that is like, well, what and why are we using it? And that outcome is really important. Are we doing this so that this, using prescriptive analytics so that this is bi-directional, that this is something that we are creating value for both, versus, trying to take advantage. And so, I mean, that's unfortunately a question I can't just answer for anybody and everybody. But why is very important to push the idea of responsible use, push the idea of thinking about the outcomes that we want, versus just, oh, we have the data, so this is capable. That's the wrong idea. The wrong idea that you have information and should use it and can use it is not where you start. You need to start with what are you trying to do and what value are you trying to do. Yeah, all right, and we have a great question that came in from Michael Johnson. Are there any major differences in implementing this process in the government world as opposed to the private sector, regulations and Fed oversight? In short, no. But I want to say that and quickly caveat, I am not glossing over that question at all. or the fact that there is differences. So Catapult, have a lot of experience working on actually both sides. In fact, leading, as Erwin mentioned in the keynote, we're leading the data culture transformation for the entire state of North Dakota, but we also work in private enterprise. So this model, this capability model that we put together speaks to really all the worlds. Now, what it doesn't do is it lets us know what's important for transforming or measuring a data culture, and this is true in commercial. Even inside commercial, what you need and how you do things are going to be different company by company. Some companies have strict walls between the engineers that might maintain the data platform and data access. Some will have don't. As in the state, the cases where we work in the state of Texas, looking at what capabilities that we could light up from the cultural perspective and the technical platforms actually led the chief data officers of the state of Texas to rewrite rules and data sharing agreements across all the agencies. So, this is the nice thing is that this capability maturity model like this one allows us to baseline and look at things regardless of which industry you're in, and say, okay, I can take that learning, that doesn't apply. And so, there are, in short, there's major differences, but honestly, the major differences matter more on your culture and your own processes, not whether you're gov or in commercial. Because we have actually had easier times implementing some solutions in gov than we have in some of our other commercial sectors. But great question, Michael. And I hope I answered or hit at a lot of what you wanted to know. All right.
With that, I think it sounds like we're going to wrap, Sid, so that we have everybody can have a few minutes break before we start the next session. And Sid, you said the next session was 11:30 Central, and what was the topic again?
Yeah, so 11:30, we're going to hear about measuring your data maturity and build your roadmap. And so those 6 categories that I gave the quick introduction to, and made my case for 3 in particular, those will all be broken out in detail in the next session.
Awesome. All right, very good. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today.
Thank you.